Hey guys, tonight we're heading to the middle of the desert, but ancient Persia's scorching plateau, where temperatures swing like a moody cat. During the day, your sandals nearly melt to the sand, but at night, you'll wish you brought a second blanket. That's exactly where we're going. Into this peculiar, dry, golden land, to uncover how one of the hottest civilizations figured out how to make and store ice, Yakhchals, in the desert. No electricity, no modern insulation, just cleverness, physics, and a lot of patience. Imagine it now. The sky is ink black above you, sparkling with unfamiliar constellations. The Milky Way a soft swirl across the heavens. Around you, low mud brick homes blend into the dust. Around you, the world is beginning to fall asleep except for a few night owls clattering about in alleyways, and a lazy cat flopped on a rooftop. It's been a long day under the Persian sun, but out here, night feels like a reprieve. Then he points to the east, where the outline of a strange dome rises like a quiet moon from the desert floor. Even the earth cools off, radiating its daytime heat back to the sky like an exhausted sigh. Somewhere in the distance, a jackal yips. You walk quietly, the cool sand crunching beneath your feet, guided only by moonlight and a lantern flame that barely flickers. The outer walls rise 20 feet tall and slope smoothly inward in inverted cone. Sound disappears. Down here, the walls are made of a strange plaster sand, clay, goat hair, lime, and ash designed to resist heat and moisture alike. It smells faintly of minerals and old wood. And at the bottom, there it is, an empty basin carved into the floor, once filled with blocks of ice that might have lasted for months, even in 110-degree summers. The dome is silent, eerie even, its thick walls marked by centuries of heat and wind. No doors, no windows, just a narrow opening and a set of stairs spiraling downward into shadow. Your goal tonight? Chill out, literally. What we do know is that by the 5th century BCE, Persians had mastered passive refrigeration. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The insulation is so effective, it might as well be a thermos the size of a house. You glance upward and see the clever geometry. The dome channels hot air up and out through the top, while the cold stays nestled deep below. Rostam offers you another sip of his miracle water, cool as a mountain stream. Sleep comes better when the body isn't boiling, he says. And again, he's not wrong. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I always love seeing the mix of sleepy time zones. You probably wouldn't survive this climate without a trick like the Yakhchal. Most didn't. Only those who learned how to steal cold from the jaws of heat made it through. Someone starts playing a kamancha. In the distance, a bowed string instrument with a sound like a sad lullaby. The Yakhchal stands firm, quietly preserving a memory of coolness in a land ruled by heat. The moon peeks in through a hole in the ceiling. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is dry, but not dead. A soft breeze brushes your face as you walk toward the edge of town. You pass under an arched gateway low, stone-lined with decorative tiles chipped by time. The scent of baked earth and date syrup lingers in the air. Somewhere nearby, someone's making flatbread. And that's when your host, a wiry man named Rostam, meets you with a nod. He's barefoot, robes tied loosely at the waist, and his beards as curly as the sheep in the hills. He carries a ceramic jug filled with water, cool enough to make your teeth sting. That's your first taste of the miracle. "How do you think I keep this cold?" he asks, with a smirk. From afar, it looks like a clay beehive squatting in the sand. But step closer, and it becomes something else entirely. You descend. The temperature drops with every step. Your breath slows. It feels impossible. Historians still argue whether the Yakhchal originated during the Achaemenid Empire or even earlier, possibly borrowed from Babylonian cooling pits. You run your fingers along the smooth plaster. It's not damp. Rostam laughs softly. "Better than your refrigerator, eh?" You're inclined to agree. Above ground, the night continues. Wind kicks up dust in quiet little spirals. Your guide waves you back toward town, but not before you notice something odd. Etched into the plaster near the entry tunnel is a small carving: a camel, a snowflake, and what might be the sun crossed out. You smile. Ancient memes. Back in town, people begin shuttering their windows. Oil lamps glow faintly behind drapes. The night may be calm now, but come morning, the desert will remind you exactly who's in charge. And with that quiet realization, you feel the pull of rest, like the Yakhchal pulling warmth away from the heart of the earth. You follow the path back to your sleeping quarters. Clay walls, cotton bedding, a fan of palm leaves moving the air just slightly. And somewhere beneath your feet, a dome of ancient engineering waits to be filled with ice again. The morning sun doesn't rise in ancient Persia, it erupts. You're already awake, because sleeping past dawn in this climate isn't just unlikely, it's sweaty and inadvisable. The stone floor beneath your mat is still cool, but you can feel the creeping warmth begin to stir. Your host, Rostam, is already outside, grinding something in a mortar, while humming a song that might be older than the empire itself. You step outside, squinting into the light. The horizon is dusted in gold, the air dry enough to make your lips crack. No clouds, no shade. Nearby, a merchant is already yelling at a goat. The only relief comes from narrow alleyways, where shade stretches like a lazy cat. Just the relentless promise of another day where everything burns, bakes, or sizzles. Still, life goes on. Children chase each other with bundles of reeds. A woman hauls water in a ceramic jar, balanced effortlessly on her head. Welcome to the heart of Persia's plateau, where summer highs soar past 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and yet somehow people thrive here. The key: timing, cleverness, and knowing how to work with the heat instead of against it. Take the homes, for example. Built low, with thick earthen walls and domed ceilings, they hold on to the chill of the night like a miser hoarding coins. Because already your robe clings to your back and your forehead feels like it's hosting a small sun of its own. That's the desert's magic trick. Blistering heat by day, bone-rattling chill by night. The ancient Persians didn't just survive this, they engineered systems that used it. You'll see more of that later, especially with those ice-harvesting pools. Windows are placed high, angled to avoid sunlight, but catch the slightest breeze. What's clear is that by the time the Achaemenid kings ruled from Persepolis, this climate had shaped the very bones of their architecture, their schedules, even their diet. Doors are often left open, not for hospitality, but for survival. Someone walks by with a parasol made of palm leaves and goat hide. Children are nowhere to be seen, Now they vanished into the cool safety of their homes or under shaded courtyards. And those strange chimneys poking from rooftops, you'll get to know those very well. But for now, you follow Rostam toward the town's edge again, where morning markets unfold like patchwork quilts of shade and color. Your head spins with the idea that people lived like this for thousands of years with no electricity, no freon, no ice machines humming in the kitchen, just smart design and deep patience. Here, trade still hums in this ancient town. Dates, wool, pottery, and spices so fragrant your nose almost forgets the dust. Melted into drinks, chilled under baskets to keep fruit crisp, sometimes even wrapped in linen and pressed to aching foreheads after long journeys. A dog has managed to wedge itself between two clay pots in the only remaining patch of shadow. Even the flies have the decency to be sluggish. Doors creak open, water jugs are lifted, cooking fires are kindled. Roofs coated in lime wash to reflect heat, sleeping platforms built outdoors, where people rest under mosquito nets, chasing the breeze like its currency. The smell of turmeric, cumin, and grilled lamb fills the air like a warm, edible blanket. They built an entire culture around temperature, how to escape it, use it, even play with it. That familiar breeze returns, stirring the dust and rustling through pomegranate trees. You stretch, belly full, forehead cool, eyes heavy. Vendors lounge under makeshift awnings, sipping tea, playing backgammon, and fanning themselves with flat woven fans. Midday, Rostam tells you, we don't do much. The heat wins. You nod. You look at him suspiciously. You didn't think the ice just appears, did you? But here's the strange part. Even with this intensity, nights can dip below freezing. Historians still debate how much of this environmental wisdom was deliberate experimentation versus generational trial and error. Around you, life slows as the heat climbs. A man selling pomegranates lies on his side, fanning himself with one hand, guarding his fruit with the other. By midday, the town goes quiet. Even the animals know better. Goats lie flat in the dirt, tongues out. You return to Rostam's home and rest. The afternoon passes in a blur of half-sleep and fan-whirring, and when the light begins to shift again, that golden hour, just before dusk, you rise to find the town waking up. You eat a simple meal with Rostam and his family, flatbread still warm from the tandoor, dates stuffed with nuts, and a cold, minty yogurt drink that makes your eyes roll back slightly in your head. Yakhchal, he says smugly. Of course, the ice from those underground domes doesn't just sit pretty, it's used. You begin to notice little details now. Ceramic jugs with narrow necks designed to keep water cooler longer. Shows you how to place your sandals upside down in the shade, so the leather-dosed tea roast your feet come morning. Genius. And just like that, you realize something. The Persians didn't just build ice houses. There's a reason this civilization lasted so long. Even now, as dusk settles and the temperature begins to dip, the wind shifts. Rostam glances up at the sky, ready to meet the icemen. He asks, already tying his sandals. Wait, what? Oh yes, he says, eyes twinkling. Apparently, the real fun begins after dark. You follow him eastward again, past the edge of town, past the Yakhchal, and toward a narrow trail that snakes off toward distant hills. That's where they go. The ice hunters, men who climb under cover of moonlight, searching for the frost gods who still dwell in the heights. But more on that soon. For now, enjoy the breeze. You're going to miss it once you start climbing. The stars are brighter, now sharp, dazzling, and so numerous it's like someone spilled a bowl of salt across the sky. You're walking beside Rostam on a dusty trail, a little uphill, your sandals filling with sand. Every step crunches softly. Behind you, the town fades into hush. Ahead, just shadows, hills, and a path that seems to snake into nowhere. This way, Rostam says, gesturing with a crooked finger. The icemen are already moving. You have so many questions, but something about the night air keeps you quiet. It's cool, now deliciously so. The same desert that tried to cook you hours ago now wraps you in silk-thin breezes and silence. Somewhere far away, an owl calls once, then stops. The moon rises higher, and with it, the hills begin to show their jagged bones. After maybe an hour, you spot them. 4 figures, swaddled in cloaks, walking slowly but deliberately. Just pats his camel now and then, mutters under his breath, and checks the wrapping on his bundles. One of them leaks. He grunts, adjusts it, and moves on. They move only when it's dark, and only when the temperature stays low enough to protect their precious cargo. There, it's packed into deep pits beneath the dome, often layered with sawdust or ash to slow melting. Incredibly, it works. A lump of snow and crystal, preserved by physics, prayer, and a great deal of walking. The ice can last months, even through the height of summer. Sometimes, they bring block ice, carefully molded and harvested from night-frozen ponds, higher up. Water poured into shallow stone basins freezes overnight, especially in shaded groves or high-altitude basins. In the right season, with a bit of luck and patience, you can farm ice from the air itself. Each has a camel-humped, lazy-eyed, obedient hand. Strapped to their saddles are curious bundles. At first, you think they're just traveling merchants. Some records suggest families passed down routes and cold-keeping tricks, like prized recipes. But then you get closer and see the shine of frozen water, packed in leather sacks, wrapped in straw and linen. One man passes you a cup of something sweet and faintly icy, rosewater and crushed ice, a miracle in a clay bowl. Yes, that's ice. In the desert, you probably wouldn't survive this job. It breaks all the rules of logic, and yet, here it is. Men, snow, camels, pits, and domes all working together like a great, quiet machine. These men are ice hunters. They've climbed up into the Alborz Mountains, or perhaps the distant Zagros, collecting snow and frost in the dead of night. It's solid, heavy, real, not just a story someone made up to impress foreigners. The journey is brutal. Even with the night's chill, the elevation changes make every breath feel like chewing sand. Trudge back toward the town, back toward the waiting Yakhchal, carrying just a little piece of winter on your back. The terrain is rocky, slippery, and prone to sudden winds. And once you get to the mountain snowfields, you dig with your bare hands, fill goatskin sacks, and pray it stays frozen until morning. Walk too fast, and you sweat. Sweat warms your body. Warmth kills the cargo. Simple as that. Historians still argue whether these ice-gathering expeditions were formal professions or more of a seasonal obligation, possibly tied to taxation or temple offerings. Inside is a pit, already holding a few bundles of snow. They'll rest here for an hour, drink cool water, and swap out the warmest packs. You fall into step with one of the men, a sun-leathered fellow named Parvis. He doesn't talk much. These were the refrigeration trucks of their day, Rostam whispers beside you. And he's not exaggerating. The camels carry the ice across miles of rock and dust, back to the Yakhchals. You glance at the bundle again. One of the other icemen hums softly as he walks, some half-forgotten lullaby. The camels snort and grunt. The stars don't blink. And here's the really weird part. They're not just hauling snow. You try lifting one of the smaller bundles and nearly dislocate a shoulder. Parvis notices you struggling and chuckles. Good thing you're not doing this every night, he says. You'd melt faster than the ice. He's probably right. The men walk slowly, not just because of the load, but because the desert has rules. They reach a small way station halfway back to town, just a hut, really, made of stone and mud brick, with a sunken floor and a roof of palm thatch. You sit beside them, your robe damp at the shoulders. You sip. It numbs your tongue. The camels grumble outside. And under the moonlight, with the wind picking up and the stars wheeling overhead, you realize something strange. This system shouldn't work. You lean back against the cool stone of the hut, eyelids drooping, the desert whispering outside. Come on, Rostam murmurs. Still more to do. So you rise again.
Oh my God.
Along the trail, you notice that your hands smell like snow and leather, and maybe, just maybe, like old science. The Yakhchal looms ahead once more, half in shadow, half bathed in the waning moonlight. It looks different now that you've seen what it takes to fill it. Before, it felt like an architectural curiosity. Now, it's a sanctuary, a fortress against the sun. The icemen move without fanfare. No ceremony, no grand announcement. It glints faintly in the torchlight, layered with pale straw and thin sheets of linen. Parvis adds his block to the stack and steps back. The space around the ice is arranged carefully, almost mathematically, with air channels built in to allow the coolness to circulate. Just a practiced rhythm as they unstrap the heavy bundles from their camels and lower them one by one down into the dome's narrow mouth. The walls are cool again, blessedly so. The temperature difference is dramatic. Above, it's still desert. Some believe they may have started as wine coolers. Of all things, each is insulated by thatch, which slows the melting process, absorbs moisture, and allows airflow. No one says much. The silence is heavy, but not uncomfortable. It's a silence earned by labor. It's not just a pilot's an ecosystem. It's sticky, crunchy, and exactly what your body needs. Which makes you wonder how many world-changing inventions began with the words, "How do we keep this wine from getting warm?" But a good stack, packed right, can stay for months, even through the hottest stretch. Down here, it's almost soothing, like entering a cave made of time. Parvis murmurs something to himself, maybe a prayer, maybe just a curse for the waytand, disappears down the stairs with a chunk of mountain frozen into history. No wires, no fans, just mud, straw, geometry, and time. In fact, most medium-tool large Persian towns had multiple domes, each serving a different neighborhood or purpose. Some were private-owned by wealthy families. Others were public, maintained communally. No hard proof, just hints in old poetry and temple records, but it wouldn't surprise you. A few, according to Parvis, were even reserved for royal use or religious rituals. It's reserved for the honored, the sick, the spiritual. Cold is not casual. Cold is sacred. The moon hangs lower, the air colder, your skin prickling slightly from the contrast. It breathes, slowly, calmly, as if the very shape of it is alive. You follow him, more slowly, careful not to slip. The pit at the bottom, about 12 feet deep, already holds a layer of ice from earlier nights. You hear the distant creak of a camel cart and a woman laughing softly in the next courtyard. Somewhere below, in that sleeping dome of silence, the ice waits. The air here smells faintly of minerals and dust, but not mold or rot. This place is bone-drying other secret to preservation. And here's where it gets fascinating. This isn't just passive storage. It's thermodynamic genius. The design of the Yakhchal ISNT, accidentalite S, based on principles that took the rest of the world centuries to articulate. The structure's inverted dome shape, often about 20 feet high above ground and 10 feet below, means that warm air naturally rises and escapes through a small vent at the top. Meanwhile, the thick walls, made from a special plaster called sarouj, keep the cold in. Sarouj is a miracle mix: clay, sand, ash, goat hair, lime, and occasionally camel urine. Once cured, it's waterproof, heat-resistant, and nearly indestructible. You run your fingers along the inner wall. It's rough, but somehow clean, dry. Historians still argue whether Yakhchals were first developed as storage for ice alone, or if they originally served as general refrigeration vaults for perishables. Parvis and his team work quietly, expertly stacking the last of the blocks. And when they're done, they retreat to the upper level, where you all sit in a circle on cool stone. One of the younger icemen pulls out a small satchel of crushed dates and pistachios and offers it around. You take some. You ask how long the ice will last. Depends on the heat, says Parvis. It's nearly unthinkable. A climate this dry, this harsh. And yet they've managed to carve out a pocket of winter that lasts through July. And here, something you didn't expect. There's more than one Yakhchal in the city. He points toward the north, where a much larger dome barely pokes above the rooftops. That one, he says, only for weddings and sick elders. And just like that, you realize this isn't just about comfort, it's about culture. In a place where heat dominates every moment of the day, cold becomes ceremonial. One fringe theory even suggests that certain Zoroastrian rites involved chilled water or ice blocks during solstice ceremonies. Eventually, the men rise, stretch, and begin the trek home. They've done their work. The ice will rest now. So will they. You linger a bit longer, walking once more around the inner dome. The echo of your footsteps is soft but strange. The Yakhchal doesn't hum like a refrigerator. And when you emerge back into the night, the stars have shifted again. Back at Rostam's house, you lie on your cot, staring at the ceiling. And with that image still pure, impossibly cold, you let your body fall into rest. Morning again. But this time, you wake up before the sun. The sky is the color of ash, soft and pale, not yet burnt by daylight. You rise slowly, your limbs pleasantly heavy from the previous night's walk. The air is cooler than you'd expect after such a scorcher yesterday, and you realize something. The Yakhchal ISNT, the only miracle here. The architecture around you, the rhythms of daily life, the way people sleep, down a series of winding alleys toward a second Yakhchal. This one smaller and partially embedded into a hillside. This one's new, he explains. Well, newish. We're reinforcing it before summer hits full strength. And move and breathe are all part of the larger system that fights the heat without ever raising its voice. Rostam greets you with a grin. and a bowl of warm barley porridge topped with crushed almonds and honey. Fuel, he says, pointing to your legs. We're going to work today. Some say it emerged during the Achaemenid Empire, while others argue that it wasn't until the Sassanid era that the Yakhchal truly took its recognizable form. Of course, oral traditions push the timeline back even further. One elderly man in the village swears his grandfather's grandfather said the first one was built when the mountains were smaller and the sky was thicker. Coarse, sticky, and yet strangely smooth once applied. You help pack it into a small wall, the dome's outer edge. It needs tending, replastering cracks, reinforcing foundations, replacing the domed cap if erosion wears it down. One points at the dome and asks Rostam something in a sing-song voice. Like a garden, it requires care. Neglect it, and it becomes just another oven-shaped ruin. And every time you smooth the surface with a flat board, the smell of lime and dust drifts up like a memory. You don't ask what kind of work, you just eat. It's still half finished, but it already feels timeless, like the kind of building that was always here. Even when no one lived in this desert at all. Eternal. Soon you're following him and two boys, his nephews, maybe. Underneath, a young girl fans her grandmother, who reclines on a cot, sipping something cool from a metal cup. The Yakhchal is part of a network: wind catchers, evaporative pots, mountain ice, careful schedules, shaded streets. Together, they form a system that allowed life not just to survive in this heat, but to be comfortable. You take your break under a lean-to covered in reeds, sipping cold water from a glazed ceramic jar. It's not icy, but it's cooler than air temperature. That's no accident. The jars are porous, designed to slowly sweat moisture through the clay, which evaporates and cools the contents inside. A primitive and brilliant evaporative cooling system. And just like that, you're on a construction crew. Just baskets of material, curved wooden tools, and a surprising amount of goat hair. A defiance against a sun that never sleeps, and a quiet, clever, daily refusal to let it win. For the plaster, Rostam explains, it makes it stick together better, stronger, more flexible. No steel, no concrete mixers. And he's right. The mixture surge again feels odd under your fingers. Inside, they'd keep butter, yogurt, or even flower petals soaked in rosewater. One old woman swears her family stored an entire chicken like that. For 2 days, no fire, no spoilage. A miracle, maybe. Or maybe they just understood their environment better than we do. Hot air, as you've learned by now, loves to rise and escape. Not cold, but calm, quiet, like the bones of a refrigerator waiting to be filled with breath. It minimizes surface area exposed to sunlight while maximizing the depth at which cold air can settle. The deeper you go, the cooler it stays. The Yakhchal's design is what makes it work. That inverted cone shape, it's not just for show. You step inside this half-finished one, and even without ice or insulation yet, it's noticeably cooler than outside. Historians still debate just how early this architectural logic appeared. Hard to argue with that kind of evidence. You learn that the Yakhchal isn't just constructed once and forgotten. As you smooth, plaster, and carry buckets, a few small kids gather around to watch. He asked if it will hold cold enough to freeze sorbet. Rostam translates, laughing. You laugh too, but then stop. Wait, sorbet. Rostam winks. Oh yes, I'll show you later. The day warms fast. By mid-morning, the sun is fully awake, and the shade has become everyone's best friend again. Just another little victory in this never-ending tug-of-war with heat. And here's a strange fact you overhear. Some households kept tiny versions of Yakhchals, like large clay urns buried halfway into the ground with little straw lids. You lean back, arms caked in lime dust, the Yakhchal's dome now glowing under the morning sun, and you start to realize something. It wasn't just one trick that made this possible. You hear a voice calling, lunch, time to pack up, as you walk back toward Rostam's home, hands sore, feet dusty. You pass a small alley where someone hung strips of cotton across two rooftops to create extra shade. There's a hush to the moment, a kind of reverence. And you get it now. This isn't just about temperature, it's about dignity. A defiance against a sun that never sleeps, and a quiet, clever, daily refusal to let it win. You're back in town now, walking through a maze of mud brick homes and narrow alleys that weave and twist like someone designed them in a dream war, a panic. But there's order in the chaos. You notice it now. The alleys don't just protect from the sun, they channel the wind. Every turn, every curve is a funnel drawing cool air from higher ground down into the heart of the city. But they're not ornamental. They're part of the desert's secret cooling strategy, and you're about to find out how ancient Persians turned air into air conditioning, and above the roofs, tall chimneys, each with slotted openings that catch the slightest breeze. As you step inside, the first thing you notice is that it's cool. Not just less hot, actually cool. You rub your arms. It's refreshing, like walking into a shaded courtyard in spring. They look like upside-down periscopes or giant hollow chimneys. The airflow glides across your arms, your cheeks, and your eyelids. It's like being slowly exhaled on by the desert itself. The wind catcher towers above the living space, and inside it, a network of internal walls and vents carefully directs airflow downward, funneling it into the house, like turning a weather dial. Others had multiple shafts, one to pull in air, and one to release the rising hot air. It's passive, silent, and beautifully low maintenance. As the hot desert air passes through the slats at the top, it's redirected into the interior, just airflow. In the corner, a folded mat, a pillow, and a basket of dried figs. They're still part of the architecture, the culture, the quiet rebellion against the heat. You suddenly understand why siestas are essential around here. But by the time it reaches you, it's been cooled by contact with shaded surfaces, sometimes even damp ones. Rostam leads you to his friend's home, a merchant named Dariosh, who owns a particularly large wind catcher. And then you hear it, the faint whistle of wind. Dariosh smiles and gestures upward. They partnered with it. They studied its rhythms, learned its secrets, and then used the very elements air, water, earth, and sunlight to keep themselves alive and even comfortable. You walk up a ladder to peek into the shaft. The sun's lower now, shadows long, the streets alive again with quiet movement. Empty now, but you can imagine them filled. You look at Rostam. At night, the desert sky offers no cloud cover, so heat escapes freely. Water in these pools radiates its warmth upward into the vast emptiness, and with no insulation to trap the heat, it cools. Some say these pools were more common in high-altitude towns, where the freeze came easily. Others argue they were a backup system, a way for poor families to gather small amounts of ice without climbing mountains, sometimes enough to freeze, especially in winter. You pass children playing marbles in the dust, a woman sifting lentils in a shallow tray, and a man brushing a donkey like he's painting it into a fresco. It's simple, no moving parts, no fans, just physics. Hot air rises, cool air sinks, and the structure helps it do exactly that, on command. Historians still argue whether the badger or windcatcher originated in ancient Persia or Mesopotamia. Children helped. Sometimes whole families would gather before sunrise to collect the fragile treasure before the sun reclaimed it. Some evidence suggests Persian engineers were already using them by the 4th century BCE, long before air conditioning units made the desert civilized. The floor is smooth, slightly concave, and lined with a silty material that absorbs heat slowly. Above you, the open sky. Tonight, it will turn this little basin into a freezer. When the air enters the home, it passes over or near the surface of the cool water, dropping in temperature. The result, a natural zero-electricity version of central air. And in Yazda City, famous for surviving extreme heat, they still stand today, some over 40 feet tall. Daroshe explains that his windcatcher is connected to a qanat, an underground water channel that cools the air even further. You stretch out on a cushion beside the windcatcher's base. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some windcatchers were designed with directional flaps, so households could choose which way to catch the breeze based on seasonal winds. Dariash brings you a drink, something cold and citrusy, and points to a small room off to the side. That's where we sleep during the day, he says. Coolest spot in the house. You peek in. It's half subterranean, with thick walls and no windows. Modern engineers still marvel at these windcatchers. Some believe, with slight modification, they could replace air conditioning in arid climates entirely. But here, they've never left. You look around and realize the Persians didn't just adapt to the desert. Rostam appears in the doorway, ready for the ice pools. You blink. You mean like a bath. He laughs. No, real ice from the sky. You follow him back into the afternoon light. You exit the city's edge again, walking toward a flat patch of land bordered by small walls and dry brush. And then you see them. Shallow pools, no deeper than a few inches, spaced evenly across the ground, like a grid of mirrors. At night, he explains, the water freezes, bit by bit, one thin sheet at a time. He's not joking. The trick is radiative cooling, to be precise. And just like that, they harvest ice from the sky. Historians still debate whether this method was a primary source of ice or just supplemental. But here's what's undeniable. It works. One man shows you how they used to gently skim the ice at dawn, sliding it onto palm mats and rolling it up for storage or immediate use. You step down into an empty pool. You sit quietly on the edge. A breeze kicks up, rustling the grass. The day's warmth retreats, and somewhere behind you, a windcatcher spins a sigh into stone. It's evening now. The pools shimmer faintly under the rising stars, though they're still empty. By morning, if the sky stays clear and the air still, a thin sheet of ice will form like magic 1 millimeter at a time. In a place where even water is precious, they found ways to harvest cold as if it were wheat. You leave the basins behind, but the idea clings to you. Ice, grown like a crop. There's one more place, he says, where the cold is kept even longer. Rostam walks beside you, hands behind his back, as the night deepens. And this one's been used by the same family for 300 years, Rostam claims. You follow. Cool air wafts out, brushing your face with a scent of dates, dust, and stone. Just enough to chill a drink, cool an aching head, or keep tonight's dessert from melting into memory. No shouting vendors, no camels snorting, just silence and the soft click of sandals on packed earth. You pass an old gate, slip through a narrow corridor, and emerge into a walled courtyard with trees-tall cypresses and fruiting quince. It's dark, but in a cozy way. On one wall, jars of pickled vegetables and dried herbs sit neatly stacked. What's clear is that they were common, especially in arid regions where food preservation was life insurance. On another, clay pots of preserved butter, sour yogurt, and fruit leather. Its glow dances across the walls, revealing faded paintings' geometric designs, symbols of Anahita, the Persian goddess of water and fertility. Not quite ice cream, not quite sorbet, but unmistakably cold and sweet. The kind of treat that shouldn't exist in this climate, and yet here it is, delicate and perfect, made possible by everything you've seen today. This, he says, is shaped to sink into sand, keeps it cooler. He's right, the water is cold, almost startling, and it's just been sitting there in the earth's quiet embrace. You wonder if this room once held temple offerings, or maybe it was just a sanctuary for food in lean seasons. A small pool sits at the center, reflecting moonlight, and beyond it stands a domed building, smaller than a Yakhchal, but just as strange. The path takes you to a quieter part of town. It's not an ice house. It's a cellar, kind of ancestor to the modern pantry or refrigerator. The gap between them allows airflow to trap and stabilize temperature. The Persians didn't need any of that. They used stone and sun, wind and water, geometry and patience. The roof is low and rounded to encourage circulation. No angle is wasted. No part of this place ignores physics. You lie back against the wall, the cold seeping gently into your spine. You don't shiver. Everything works together like a quiet spell of engineering and ritual. He steps up to the wooden door and pushes it open. Inside, the space is carved into the ground, lined with shelves, and shadowed by low ceilings. At the far end, something colder still, an earthen bin of ice shards, insulated with layers of straw. This is the Konaga of cold, Rostam whispers, half joking, half reverent, and it does feel sacred, not just practical and intentional. You sit on a low stool as Rostam lights a small oil lamp. Historians still argue whether cellars like these were based on Zoroastrian storage practices, or if they evolved independently through generations of necessity. And the ingenuity didn't stop at storing food. Rostam shows you a stone water jug with an oddly pointed base. He brings out a small bowl of faluda dessert, of vermicelli noodles, frozen with rosewater and lime. You take a bite, you savor it, and for a moment, time seems to pause, caught between the ancient and the present, between the unbearable sun and this unlikely cold. The cellar grows quieter. You notice now that its walls are double-layered, like those of a Yakhchal. You stretch your legs and lean back. Through a small opening in the ceiling, you see the moon, high, silver, watching. Outside, the town winds down again. Someone plays a flute. A door creaks. Somewhere, water pours into a jug. And you think about how much of this has been forgotten by the world that invented thermostats and compressors and apps that chill your coffee remotely. And maybe a little rose water. Rostam douses the lamp. The cellar dims. The air is still. You sigh. Above, the stars shift. Below, the earth holds its breath. And inside this perfect pocket of calm and cold, you do the same. You wake to birdsong and the earthy scent of the cellar's straw-lined floor. For a moment, it's hard to tell what century you're in. The quiet, the coolness, the heavy stillness of a room that has kept secrets for generations. Rostam is already awake, of course, sitting cross-legged beside a small tray of warm bread, goat cheese, and olives. He hands you a piece wordlessly, and you eat together in comfortable silence. Eventually, he rises, stretches, and says, "Let's visit the archive." You assume he means a library. He does not. Instead, you find yourself in the home of an elderly man named Arash, who lives just beyond the town's bazaar. He walks with a cane and seems mostly made of wrinkles and sarcasm. His home is a museum of old ledgers, parchments, broken tools, and family stories. "This," he says, pointing to a cracked clay shard, "is my grandfather's inventory of his ice sails." You squint. The markings are primitive, scratch system of tallies and dates, but Arash has the whole thing memorized. "We used to sell it by weight," he says. "They didn't think about cold the way you do," he says. "To them, it was a luxury, yes, but also a gift from the mountains, a sign the gods still loved us." In the absence of currency, sometimes people bartered a chicken for a week's worth of cold water. My mother used to say we only deserved cold if we treated it with respect. A bolt of silk for a winter's stash of ice. Inside is a fragment of an ice stamp, a clay seal, once pressed into straw packages to mark ownership. "This was ours," he says. "No one would dare sell another family's ice." The Zagros Mountains, tall and snow-capped, were believed to house deities of wind, stone, and sky. Bringing down ice was seen as borrowing from their pantry, something that required ritual and return. There were always rumors, he says, eyes narrowing. Certain families who could freeze water, even when the moon was hidden. They knew tricks, charms, ways to coax the frost from the dirt itself. After everything you've seen, you kind of do too. But no one trusted the scales, so we sold it by time. 1 hour's worth of ice. You bought a slice, and if it melted before you got home, your problem. You laugh, but he's serious. It was a system of meaning, a currency, a marker of family pride, a religious token, a public good. Others suggest a more connected system of transport, involving caravans and storage points across the empire. Every structure is a survival strategy. Every street, a cooling system. Every family, a steward of cold. The truth might lie somewhere in between. Networks of seasonal trade, organized more by trust and tradition than by government edict. "Come on," he says. "One more place, I promise. This one's weird." He shows you old contracts scratched into wood, ice deliveries for weddings, cooling services for the sick, exclusive Yakhchal privileges for nobility. Historians still argue about the scale of the ice trade. Some believe it was purely local each community, handling its own supply. One parchment lists delivery routes between towns, not paved roads, but night paths, shaded and protected, marked with stone piles and guarded trees where camels could rest in shade, while ice was shuffled between storage huts. One sketch shows a double Yakhchal system, where one dome stored snow, and the other stored salt to prolong the freezing point. You blink. That's smart, suspiciously smart. Arash taps the parchment with a yellowed finger. And this is where the conversation gets stranger. Rostam chimes in with a story about a shrine in the hills where villagers once offered the first ice of the year to the spirits of the high places. Arash nods. You sip tea as he pulls out a small woven pouch. It's not about patents or property laws. It's about honor. You glance around the room, scrolls stacked like sleeping cats, baskets of goat parchment, broken handles of clay ladles, and realize something incredible. Cold wasn't just a temperature, and in some cases, a secret. Arash lowers his voice. You raise an eyebrow. You believe that? He shrugs. I believe they knew something we don't. And honestly, you spend the rest of the morning leafing through brittle records, marveling at hand-drawn diagrams of early Yakhchals, wind catchers, even complex cooling courtyards with underground vents and water channels. Arash nods. We didn't waste anything. Outside, the heat has begun to return. You say goodbye, thank Arash, and step into the glare once again. But the world feels different. You no longer see sun and sand. You see temperature gradients. You follow, curious. And as you walk through the heat, your skin sticky again. You begin to see it not as punishment, but as the force that shaped a civilization of builders, dreamers, and engineers of cold. You're not sure what to expect when Rostam says weird. After everything you've seen, nice, harvested from starlight, goat hair, mud domes that refrigerate air, desert wind turned into an obedient brazier, not sure what weird even means anymore. Turns out, it's a garden, but not just any garden. He leads you through a narrow stone gate, flanked by cracked lion carvings, into a long, sunken courtyard lined with trees, stone benches, and shallow canals. The air immediately shifts cooler, more fragrant. You're in shade, but it's not just the absence of sun that makes you sigh in relief. And this one, Rostam explains, is built atop something even older, a subterranean cooling system that combines everything you've learned so far. Rostam points to a hexagonal platform rising slightly above the far end of the garden. It used to house a small stone pool fed by the coldest water from the Qanat. By layering airflow, moisture, and shade, they could preserve perishable goods, chill clay jars, and host summer gatherings where rosewater drinks stayed refreshing for hours. It's the design. The whole garden is a kind of giant breathing lung for the earth. But you can imagine it, shimmering with cold spring water, shaded by vines, the wind rolling off its surface like a whispered lullaby. Every plant, every tile, every breeze that brushes your face. In the hottest months, people would bring their bedding here. You can almost see them, families lying on woven mats, listening to frogs croak in the canals, children snoring under damp cotton sheets, and above them the stars tangled in grapevines, not just for naps, for the whole night, engineered, intentional, whispering coolness into the bones of this blazing world. This is a Persian Chahar Bagha, 4-part garden, split by water channels, its geometry echoing a cosmic plan. No air conditioning, just climate choreography, a dance between stone, wind, and water. Could they enhance cooling through transpiration? Maybe. Science hasn't confirmed it, but it makes for a romantic theory. Below your feet lies an interconnected network of qanats, air shafts, and ventilation tunnels. You see that pavilion. The evaporating moisture created a cold draft that swept across the floor like a ghostly breeze. The garden absorbs noise the way the Yakhchal absorbs heat. Everything slows, even your thoughts. A testament to a people who decided that the hottest places on earth could be among the most livable if you paid attention. You imagine living your whole life with this relationship to the land, not conquering it, not fearing it, but collaborating with it, letting heat and wind and stone form part of your vocabulary. He chuckles, probably just a drunk old man with a blanket and a good memory. The kind of calm that only comes when you understand something deeper than facts. The kind of calm that comes with knowing how people lived, not just what they built. You walk over and crouch beside the empty basin. It's smooth, lined with turquoise tile, cracked in a few places. Some believe that only wealthy landowners could afford to build on top of such elaborate canal systems. Others argue that many cities, especially those near trade routes, had communal garden coolers, places where cold was shared, celebrated, and even ritualized. Rostam explains how aristocrats, and sometimes scholars, used gardens like this to store the cold in more subtle ways. Historians still argue whether these cooling gardens were a widespread phenomenon or the privilege of the elite. And here comes the weird part. As you sit under a fig tree, nibbling on a dried apricot Rostam hands you, he tells you about the sleep gardens. You blink. Sorry, what? He grins. You stare at the grass. The system was ingenious. Water channels below, trees above, and cooling air pulled up from the ground through vents in the marble floor. And there's more. In some of the more elaborate gardens, the floors of the sleeping pavilions were made of porous stones, slightly dampened at sunset, so that by nightfall, one fringe theory even suggests that certain botanicals, like night-blooming jasmine or myrtle, were chosen not just for scent, but for their temperature impact. Rostam tells you a story about a famous poet who once slept for 30 nights in a garden like this, composing verses in his dreams, and waking only to write them on leaves. Still, you believe it. This garden breathes differently. You close your eyes and let the air swirl around your ankles, your fingertips, your temples. Even the sound here is different. You hear water trickling below ground, a rustle of date fronds above, a child giggling in the distance. You begin to realize these were not just places of comfort. They were philosophies in brick and leaf. As the sky shifts into lavender, Rostam stretches and nods. I told you it was weird. You nod. Weird in the best possible way. He smiles. And as the first stars blink into being, you start to feel that familiar calm creeping back in. You lie back on the garden bench. Let the breeze find you. And somewhere under your feet, the earth exhales again. Night settles in once again, velvety, warm, and full of secrets. You're back in Rostam's courtyard, reclining on a woven mat. The stars overhead are so sharp, you feel like you could pluck them with a spoon. The air, though not cold, is satisfyingly mild. Another little victory for Persian architecture. He rolls out a carpet, motions for you to sit, and begins unfolding something special. A parchment, its edges frayed, filled with curious diagrams, circles, angles, notations in Persian and Arabic, and a small, faded drawing of a Yakhchal. Rostam, sitting beside you with a bowl of honeyed walnuts, points to the night sky. But why the cold seemed to behave like a living thing, rising, falling, hiding in corners, nestling into jars. You want to understand how we made cold, he says, quiet as a whisper. There are no street lamps, here just the occasional lantern, hung low beside a door. The stars provide most of the light you need to meet the man who tried to map it. That's how you end up, late at night, walking toward the madrasa, the old learning house at the edge of the town. Inside the madrasa, a young caretaker named Behzad leads you to a narrow room stacked floor to ceiling with scrolls, slates, and wooden tablets. Put the straw first, one note reads, then the cleanest ice, then a prayer if you have one. Some scholars argue that his notes were coded instructions for building better Yakhchals. Al-Rafiq believed that certain moon phases enhanced ice formationist, waning crescent moons on cloudless nights. He even lists offerings to be made beforehand: rosewater, almonds, and silence. Others believe he was writing a treatise on patience and humility, using cold as a metaphor for spiritual clarity. Between builders and the unseen forces they hoped to tame. This, Behzad says, tapping the page, is the lost manuscript of Imam Hossein al-Rafiqa, scholar, mystic, and, apparently, an obsessive thermometer. That it followed rules not just of physics, but of mood. You lean in. The manuscript reads like an 11th century engineering blog. Hossein documented not only how the Yakhchals worked, he believed cold had a personality, Behzad explains. He said, Behzad smiles. He wanted to be surrounded by the cold, just in case the afterlife was too warm. He mapped the behavior of cold throughout the year, using not mercury thermometers, those didn't exist, but ceramic vessels with water, and timed melt cycles, primitive, painstaking, ingenious, filled with olive oil, and lit at twilight during solstice. Al-Rafiq believed the act of putting fire inside ice was the ultimate expression of balance, or maybe defiance. It sounds absurd. It also sounds kind of accurate. According to Al-Rafiq, cold was a retiring spirit that preferred darkness, stillness, and stone. Historians still debate whether his work was scientific or symbolic. Was he trying to understand cold or charm it, preparing to reset itself for another day of battle with the sun? You trace one diagram with your finger. It shows the interior of a Yakhchal, annotated with wind currents, light exposure, and ideal ice-backing arrangements. Behzad shrugs. He was thorough. You feel close to something eternal, not just the preservation of ice, but the preservation of knowledge. Ideas kept cool, kept safe, passed down in faded ink and goatskin scrolls. One fascinating page shows an early attempt at predicting freeze patterns in radiative cooling pools. And you know what? The more you read, the more it makes sense. This wasn't just meteorology, it was relationship building between people and weather. Behzad shares a local legend. When Al-Rafiq died, he asked to be buried in the floor beneath a garden pavilion near a cooling pool he helped design. You sit back, eyes full of candlelight, brain buzzing from the past. And here is a strange detail to chew on. One of the final entries in the manuscript describes an ice lanterna hollowed-out sphere of frozen water, like tea on a summer day, Behzad says. Makes no sense, but it works. You nod, because you've seen it. Now how opposites blend here. Ice in the desert, wind as a gift, stone that breathes. The candle flickers lower, the room a pocket of warm quiet wrapped in the ideas of the dead. Eventually, you and Rostam step out into the night once more. It's late now, the town sleeps, the air is still, but it isn't hot. You realize that all around you invisible systems are still at work. Domes venting heat, walls radiating cold, water flowing silently beneath your feet. And tonight, it's winning. You take one last look up at the stars, then begin the walk home, wondering if our Rafiq would approve of your newfound appreciation for the subtle arts of cold. He probably would, so long as you didn't leave the cellar door open. You sleep deeper than you expected, cool air curling around your feet, your dreams rippling with images of domes, wind catchers, and whispering stone. When you wake, the sun is already up, but something's changed. The morning air is soft, touched with jasmine and sun-warmed clay. You sit up, blink away sleep, and notice something you missed before. A small brass bell hanging in Rostam's courtyard. The heat isn't harsh, not yet. Then another. It's subtle, but deliberate, like a conversation in sound. You glance at Rostam, who's sipping tea beneath the shade of a mulberry tree. He nods. Today is collection day. It isn't decorative, it's a signal. You hear a matching bell chime from somewhere in the distance. It creaks under the weight of straw-wrapped ice blocks, each one shaped like a small coffin and handled with reverence. The cart driver, a sun-darkened man named Farid, offers you a ride in broken English and better smiles. For what? He smiles. The harvest of cold. That's how you find yourself following a camel cart, yes, a real camel cart through the winding back roads of town. Some records suggest entire professions once revolved around the handling of cold ice runners, ice merchants, ice cutters, even ice guardians, who were paid to sleep beside the Yakhchals at night to ensure no one stole a chunk of frozen gold. You hop aboard. A chunk was weighed short by a palm width, and a shouting match in the bazaar escalated into a week-long boycott. Still is. He catches your eye and raises the bowl in salute. Bless the Yakhchal, he said, half joking. For a feverish boy, the old healer says, he has the fire in his brain. She tucks the pouch under her robes and disappears into the back of her shop. You wonder how often this happens, how cold, even in tiny doses, means relief, or the idea of it. The memory of cold, its containment, its quiet worship. The route is circuitous. Every stop has a story. The first is a bakery, the kind that still uses clay tender ovens dug into the ground. One vendor unpacks jars of yogurt from a shaded crate, still cool from being stored overnight in a shared cellar. More than ice, or lime plaster, or camel hair. Without patience, no kanat would have been dug. No dome would have cured. No cold would have been harvested from the open sky. A woman drapes wet cloth over a basket of grapes to keep them plump and juicy until midday. Where did the world turn away from patience, from this long, careful dance with nature? It didn't vanish, he says. It just changed clothes. Farid unloads a single brick of ice wrapped in fig leaves, exchanging it for a cloth sack of flatbread. The ice, it goes into a clay-lined hole in the corner of the bakery, not to chill the dough, but to cool the baker. The woman who answers the door takes the brick wordlessly, tips Farid a jar of dates, and disappears. To preserve food during blackouts, to store sacred water for holy days, to show their children how the old world worked and why it was worth preserving. Not a word exchanged, just a system as natural as dawn. The heat of the oven would be unbearable otherwise. Next stop, an apothecary. You've passed it before, but never noticed the venting system openings near the top that pull steam out while letting light in. Inside, Men scrub themselves with rough mitts and sing old songs off-key. Farid delivers ice here in bowls, to be crushed and stirred into rosewater for those who want a cooling rinse before stepping back into the heat. Here, a small ice shard is carefully pressed into a pouch of medicinal herbs and minerals, and then the bathhouse. It's made of mud brick, squat and curved like a loaf of bread left too long in the sun. Historians still argue how widespread this ice force service economy really was. There's even one tablet now housed in a Tehran museum that documents a lawsuit between two rival ice delivery families. Apparently cold was a serious business, Farid says with a chuckle. As the cart turns down another dusty lane, you pass an old man holding a chilled bowl of water to his forehead. You smile, because you kind of want to say it too. You stop briefly near the city's central plaza, where market tents are already being erected. Everything here, you realize, revolves around cold. You help Farid unload one last ice brick at a home marked with an old Zoroastrian fire symbol. You begin to wonder, what happened to this way of life? Rostam, who's appeared beside you again, seems to read your mind. He tells you how, even today, in parts of Yazd and Kerman, people still use Yakhchals, not because they need to but because they choose to. There's a word he uses, sabr, patience. That's the real resource here. You look at the cart, half empty now, its trail behind you melted in tiny puddles across the street. And you realize this was never about temperature alone. It was about trusting time, trusting the earth to hold its secrets, and the wind to do its job, and trusting the people to carry the cold forward, one precious shard at a time. The day grows warmer now, but the heat feels softer somehow. Or maybe you've just learned to see it differently. Every gust of wind, every shaded archway, every cold jar resting in a ceramic cradlelet all makes sense in a way it didn't before. This, he says, is where the winter rituals used to happen. Rostam leads you up a hill behind the town. The climb is gentle, winding through tamarisk trees and scattered fig bushes. As you reach the top, you spot a wide platform of stone, maybe 20 paces across. It's surrounded by low stone walls, nothing fancy. But at the center stands something unmistakable, a small, cracked altar, overgrown with herbs and age. This hilltop shrine, forgotten by most, was once the place where people brought the first ice of winter, not to store it, to thank it. Some scholars think these offerings were designed to bind the coming season's colda, form of symbolic contract. We respect you. Please stay a while longer. Others say they left pomegranates or coins frozen into small cakes of snow. Rostam clears a few weeds and gestures for you to sit. They held small processions. Families would carry the brittle sheets through town, singing or reciting poetry, not loudly, gently, as if waking the village to joy, not shouting it down. You tilt your head. Rituals, the winding tunnels of the Kenots, the domed shadows of the Yakhchals, the whispering wind. The words feel like ice cubes dropped into warm tea. You can help but feel like you re-looking at a massive organism, a living creature designed to drink the sun and breathe out coolness. Offerings to the gods of cold, he says, half smiling. They painted white tiles with chalk and laid them in the pools. Children were told to whisper their wishes to them anyway. It's not the cold that matters, one elder supposedly said. It's the belief that it will return, not for profit, not for power, just to make life bearable. a cool drink, a chilled yogurt, a good sleep. You blink. You hadn't realized how spiritual this story was about to become. Not to warm the space, just to scent it. Sweet basil, dry myrtle. They said it made the cold settle in deeper. About belief, about patience, about engineering miracles with nothing but time, dust, and faith. They used to bring snow down from there, on camelback, wrapped in wool, all-night travel. By morning, a town had ice. According to Rostam, before the rise of Islam, before even Zoroastrianism took firm root, desert communities held deep reverence for the forces that shaped their survival: fire, water, wind, and yes, cold. Some say they poured milk over the altar, Rostam says, pointing to a now broken trough. Historians still argue what these rituals truly meant. Were they religious acts, civic traditions, or simply the human urge to assign meaning to something miraculous? You glance around. From this high point, the entire town lies before you like a pale, sun-drenched tapestry, and beneath it, there's a detail Rostam shares that lingers with you. In some ancient villages, when the first ice successfully formed in the shallow desert pools, people didn't just collect it. One old verse survives in local memory. You'd hum it while smoothing straw over the blocks. The breath of night has kissed the sand for a time you never lived, in a place that somehow feels like home, and left its lace upon our hands. You repeat it quietly. Nearby, Rostam uncovers a small, scorched ceramic disc buried beside the altar. This was used to burn herbs, he explains. Quirky, yes, but you believe it. And here's the strangest part. Some old texts suggest that in especially dry years, when no ice formed, communities faked it. You think about that as a dry wind stirs your clothes. From the hill, you can see the old roads caravan path leading toward the mountains. Rostam points to it, eyes narrowed. You imagine those camels now, plodding silently through the starlight, their backs carrying frozen treasure from a summit 30 miles away. You sit in silence a while longer. The sun climbs, the altar warms, but the air still feels touched by shadow. Then, almost as an afterthought, Rostam tells you about the cold songs. What? He nods. Every family had one, just a few lines, sung during ice falls or before storing food. He sings a fragment, low, slow, almost inaudible. Go gently, frost, and stay a while. The sun forgets what kindness means. It's haunting, its lullaby meets incantation. It gives you goosebumps. You hum it too, without realizing, and suddenly you understand something deeper. That cold, in the Persian desert, wasn't just a season or a substance. It was a character in the story of daily life, a rare guest, a fragile companion, a friend who never overstayed, but whose absence was always felt. You rise from the hilltop with a strange ache in your chest, not sadness, exactly, but a kind of longing. And maybe that's the magic of it all. The systems, the domes, the bells and rituals. They weren't just about cold. They were about remembering how to wait. You descend the hill slowly, your sandals scuffing against the baked earth, the sun climbing higher behind you. The village below seems quieter now, almost reverent, as if it too remembers the songs and rituals you've just witnessed. Its conical dome rises like a forgotten mountain from the flat landscape. You circle it again, but this time you're not looking at its surface. Back in the heart of town, you find yourself drawn once more to the main Yakhchal, the oldest one. But Rostam catches your look and nods. You hear it now, don't you? The dome sings. You're listening, and there it is, a low, hollow hum. At first you think it's your imagination. Each gust produces a note deep, rounded, barely audible, unless you stand just right. A creature, something alive, inhaling and exhaling, balancing pressure, shifting air through its hollow ribs like lungs. Not with a voice, not with a melody, but with the movement of wind passing through slits and vents you'd never noticed. It's not for decoration, he says. It's a thermal vent system. The sound is the pressure changing, and suddenly the Yakhchal doesn't just feel like a building anymore. It feels like a machine. You step inside once more, deeper. Did noise truly affect interior temperatures? Probably not. What mattered was the ritual of respect. The last few blocks of ice gleam under layers of straw, almost glowing in the low light. The ceiling curves overhead like a closed eye. The surface tells you when it's time to reseal the plaster, he says. You feel for damp spots, listen for cracks. The understanding that this space, this cold, required a different way of moving. The cool hits you immediately, sharper now. Now looking closely, you notice tiny carvings scratched into the dome's inner ribs, symbols, numbers, initials, silent agreements between generations. He turns it over in his hands and grins. Ice games, like marbles, but colder, and with rules no one remembers anymore. But you notice something else, too. In ancient Persia, it was believed that cold stayed longer when disturbed less. Yakhchals were rarely built near streets, markets, or mosques. They were always given a kind of sacred buffer, what scholars now refer to as a thermal respect zone. Not just for the insulation, but because it felt kind, the silence. Not just the absence of noise, but a purposeful, crafted hush. It's like being inside a sleeping thought. Rostam explains that this silence wasn't accidental. It was part of the design. It's a lesson in balance. Historians still argue whether this was based on empirical observation or superstition. You lower yourself to sit on a smooth stone ledge near the base. Rostam walks the perimeter, pressing a palm to the wall every few steps. Below, the straw rustles, as if sighing in its sleep. Somewhere nearby, a lizard skitters across stone, pauses, and vanishes. You remember something Arsha said, that some families had special ice stamps to mark their share, and then something unexpected. Rostam retrieves a flat, round stone disc from a hollow in the wall, he explains. During slow seasons, kids would carve tiny trenches in the floor and flick these discs cool to slippery perfection down makeshift alleys. You try it. Your disc spins unevenly and clatters against a wall. Terrible form, Rostam says, but good enthusiasm. You both laugh, and the sound bounces softly around the dome before being swallowed whole. He pauses, then adds, "Some say that's why we built the Yakhchals so round." You raise an eyebrow. Nothing hides in corners, he says. No sharp shadows, no traps for wind, just curves. And again, you believe him. You stay there for a long while, just breathing, not speaking, letting the coolness settle into your clothes, your bones, your thoughts. Above you, the vent holes glow with daylight. This place, you realize, isn't just a relic, and it's been sitting here, quietly humming, long before you arrived. You run your fingers across the wall once more. It feels like memory, cool, patient, and waiting. You emerge from the Yakhchal into late afternoon light, blinking like someone surfacing from a dream. The sun hovers lower now, draping the town in gold and long shadows. But your mind still lingers in the hush of that dome, in its curved silence and steady breath. This one is quieter, lined with shuttered windows and fading murals. At the far end stands a house with pale blue doors and a tall fig tree sprouting from its roof. A pair of pigeons coo lazily above. Rostam is already halfway down the slope, whistling tunelessly, waving for you to follow. She greets you with a kiss to the air beside your cheeks, then ushers you into a shaded room filled with old textiles, glazed pottery, and a scent of dried mint and lemon peel. "Come on," he calls. "There's someone else you should meet." You catch up as he turns onto a narrow street you haven't walked before. But what she offers you is just as important. A window into how cold-shaped culture, not just buildings. She notices the way you lift your brows and chuckles. "I see you've tasted real cold now." Inside, you're introduced to Madame Tirani, a woman in her late 70s, wrapped in layers of linen and stories. How families would sleep on rooftops during July, listening to the Kanat water gurgling below and telling stories until they cooled off enough to fall asleep. "Sit," she says, "and drink this before your blood turns to dust." You obey. Ice was sometimes laid out, not to chill the deceased, but for the mourners. That's enough reason to do anything. A symbolic offering of calmness, a way to soothe the sorrow. Tears and cold water, she says, arrive from the same place. The drink is sharbat, a blend of lime juice, basil seeds, and crushed ice. You nod, you squint. At first, it looks decorative floral patterns, loops, and script. My grandmother stitched it during a drought. She said if we couldn't make ice, we could at least remember it with our hands. Tirana is what you'd call a keeper of habits. She's not an engineer or a historian. She describes how, in her youth, children carried jars of buttermilk wrapped in wet cloths to bury near the base of wind catchers. My grandfather never used a fan, she says. He said wind should come from the earth, not a wire. There's a rhythm to her tales, a cadence like lullabies. She tells you how wedding feasts were timed with the coldest nights when the Yakhchal had its strongest supply. The bride would be offered rose ice in silver bowls, she says. You can't wrap cold in words, she says. But we tried. If it melted before she took a sip, the groom was said to be unlucky. You laugh. Don't forget the quiet parts, she whispers. That's where the cold lives. Tehran hums softly as she waters her indoor jasmine. The air smells faintly of ice and memory. She doesn't. Ask anyone from back then, she says. A ruined ice bowl. Bad omen. And here's something curious. During funerals, he's laughing. It wasn't just about survival. It was about grace, dignity, a way of being that turned scarcity into ritual and heat into a dance partner. Historians still argue whether that tradition was religious, practical, or merely poetic. Tehran doesn't care. It made people feel better. As she refills your sharbat, she produces something from an old linen drawer, a small square of embroidered cloth, blue thread on faded cream. But then you realize it's instructions, recipe for ice, she says. You blink. Not really, she adds, but a symbolic one. The cloth reads, 1 breath of night, 2 handfuls of stillness, 1 bowl of skyfold, gently bury in silence. You stare at it for a long moment, then, gently, she tucks it back into the drawer. You stay long after the drink is finished, watching sunlight flicker through patterned windows. Rostam finally stands. We should let her rest. Pa, Tarane waves him off. I rest when there's no one left to talk to. Still, she walks you both to the door, offering you a tin of sugared almonds for the road. Then she presses her hand to your cheek. You walk away in thoughtful silence. And it hits you, this entire civilization, this desert full of contradictions, didn't just conquer heat, they curated cold. They stitched it into songs, hid it in recipes, honored it in rituals, whispered it to children before sleep. At the edge of the street, a boy runs past, clutching a dripping bowl of shaved ice. The Yakhchal is still working, the past is still alive, and the cold still remembers. Evening descends with practiced grace, and once more the town begins to glow, not with lights, but with calm. The heat of the day sighs out of walls and rooftops. Doors creak open. This time, it's served cold, steeped in mint, and kept in a wide-mouthed clay jar that has been nestled in wet sand all day. People emerge, slow and unhurried, like shadows stretching across ancient stone. You find yourself seated again in Rostam's courtyard, now bathed in gold and dust. He pours you tea, you sip. It tastes like the closing chapter of a long, lovely story. This is the part, Rostam says, where you realize it was never really about ice, the way a shallow basin of water reflects the dusky sky. Everything here is tuned not just to survive heat, but to hold coolness like a kind of language. You smile because you do. You look around the courtyard, the way the vine-laced trellis filters the light. It's in the breeze slipping past your ankles. It's in the ceramic jug sweating gently in the corner. It's in the silence after each sentence. As the stars blink open above you, Rostam begins to share the final lesson, the one that doesn't come from domes or tunnels, but from how people carried themselves. You know how you can spot someone who grew up near a Yakhchal? He asks. You raise an eyebrow. They walk slower, he says. They pause before they speak, and they never waste a shadow. He's right. You've noticed it. The architecture of behavior, the way everyone here leans into shade instinctively, the way people time their work, their errands, their arguments even, their laughter around the movement of heat. Are we shaped by climate, or do we shape ourselves to match it? Historians still argue how much of this is conscious and how much is inherited. Another fringe theory suggests that the rhythm of Persian lullabies matches the coolest hours of night, intentionally slowing a child's breath as the temperature drops. Both. Either way, the Yakhchal changed how we move. From the fiercest summer sun, it draws water, sleep, health, and calm. From scarcity, it makes elegance. Rostam shrugs. He tells you of a poet who once claimed that cold taught Persians to speak in half sentences, to let silence do the rest. Is it true? You remember the rituals, the ice songs, the children sleeping under stars beside pools that hold the breath of night. Who cares? Climate as teacher, cooling as an act of faith. It's beautiful. You lean back, letting the night thicken around you. Somewhere in the distance, the final calls to prayer drift over the rooftops. A door clicks shut. A clay bowl clinks against a stone sink. Then quiet again. This world doesn't fight the elements. It invites them in, rearranges their presence, and makes them useful. And from cold, it makes art. You remember the Yakhchal's hum, the wind catcher's slow exhale, the stories sewn into old cloth. This wasn't just history, it was architecture, as memory. You drain your tea and close your eyes. The earth is still warm beneath you, but not oppressively, not anymore. Now, It feels like a conversation, one you've finally learned how to listen to. Now, you're lying on your back, again beneath the stars, beneath the hush of a town that understands heat and forgives it. The ground is quiet, the air is still. Somewhere in the distance, a breeze shifts a hanging cloth, a camel grunts, an old Yakhchal releases its sigh. Let that coolness find you now, not just on your skin, but in your thoughts. Let the memory of lime, plaster, and straw insulation ease into your chest. Let the sound of Connaught water beneath your feet drift like a soft lullaby, winding deeper and deeper into the earth. Breathe slow, slower. There's nothing else you need to do tonight. The domes are standing watch. The wind catchers are turning gently in their sleep. Everything that needed tending was tended long before sunset. You are held by a civilization that mastered silence, perfected stillness, and sculpted peace out of sunlight. So let the day fade. Let the questions slip through your fingers like sand. You've walked desert streets where shadows were currency. You've seen ice carved from moonlight and tucked into vaults of straw. You've listened to songs meant only for water. And now finally your body is allowed to rest. Cool thoughts, soft lungs, quiet breath. Sleep now in the arms of the cold. The Yakhchal will keep it safe for you. End of script. Sweet dreams.